Hello, I'm Alex. I'm currently developing Dreadwinter, my cozy, spooky, fantasy, adventure RPG coffee shop sim. According to GitHub, it's been just over a year since I started working on this game, so let's go over where I'm at now. To give a short summary of the game for anyone that's not one of my 10 regular viewers, it's about running a coffee shop in a fantasy world, but there's also an adventure RPG stuffed in as well. Originally, when I started, it was just a coffee shop sim, but I kinda wanted to make an adventure game at the same time, so I decided to do both. Sometimes I wonder if it was a mistake, since I pretty much doubled the amount of work I need to do. But honestly, I'm happy with how it's turning out so far. Before I start, this would be a good time to go over my background, since I've neglected to do that before. I graduated from university with a degree in computer science about 2 years ago, and since then I've had short stints in IT and cybersecurity, but they weren't really programming heavy, and I was quite lazy at uni, so I don't really think I had a lot of dev experience. At the same time, I don't think game development is quite the same as things like web or app development, but I wouldn't say my background translated into a huge head start when I started Dreadwinter. Long story short, I'd say the game is nearly at a playable state, for a demo at least, which is the current milestone I'm aiming for. The basic gameplay loop is done and it looks nice, but there isn't any sound and the content is a bit limited. The main gameplay loop consists of the daily running of Dreadwinter, where you brew coffee and serve customers. At first, you're only able to make a basic coffee, but as you earn money and develop your skills, you gain access to new machines and recipes. For example, a mixing table that allows you to add in ingredients to modify a drink or create new ones altogether, and an espresso machine so you can create espresso based drinks. Later on, you can also expand the cafe, which unlocks new avenues, such as a kitchen to make desserts and an underground bar. Most of what I've been doing in the past year has been building the underlying mechanics and systems for all of this, and hopefully soon I can focus solely on making content for the game. As an example, one thing I did recently was to add an inventory system for the cafe, which means you're now able to run out of ingredients and also restock them, which allowed me to build the shop system in the game. So now you can run to Gelado & Co, the local ice cream / grocery store, and buy your supplies there. With a working inventory and item system, I can now work on creating different items, since they should be able to be plugged into the game without much work. For the most part, the cafe gameplay is playable, but there's a lot more I want to add in. Alongside that, I've also been working on building the dungeon that players will be able to explore as part of the adventuring gameplay. I think it's good to have the lore in mind before you design, as it gives you an idea of the theme you're going for, and gives a starting point for designing the levels and enemies. This dungeon is known as the Sun-Drowned Abyss, a volcanic underground cave that was once inhabited by humans during the age of the two suns. The first thing I did was to build the tile set and design environment assets for it, which means that I can quickly put together levels, which is a huge time saver. To add life to it, I added lighting to make the cracks in the rocks glow, and added smoke to the magma spouts. I'm thinking of adding a few more things to the out of bounds areas to fill in some of the empty space. After that, I worked on creating some enemies and revamping the combat system. A lot of it was made nearly a year ago, and as I've added more components and gained more knowledge on how Godot works, I figured it was a good time to rework a lot of things to make it more streamlined. When you're under time pressure, there's always the problem of whether you should sacrifice time now to save time in the future, but since I was going to be creating quite a few enemies, it was a good idea to come up with a consistent template for building them. With each one I made, the code became cleaner, and I started to make components that could be shared between them. Each enemy has unique mechanics, however, so it wasn't quite the same as reskinning the same model. I'm still considering whether I have the time to add a boss battle into the demo, since I think a lot of time will go into designing and animating it. I know what it would look like and how it would play out, but I find animating really time consuming, as it's not just a matter of drawing the frames, you also have to put everything together in the engine as well. At the very least, there should be some sort of battle and reward at the end of the dungeon. I then had to rework the combat system to interact with the enemies, as well as add mechanics that I was intending to put in, like being able to die. Currently, you can use a sword, a bow, and a staff to cast magic with. You can also equip a shield that allows you to guard from damage. The main thing to work on with this is balancing the numbers and what sort of difficulty I want to have. The key thing to think about is the rate of progression. Generally, with combat-based gameplay, you can control progression with 3 things: difficulty, length, and limiting resources. With difficulty, you can do things like increasing enemy damage to make them more punishing, or make them tankier so it takes longer to defeat enemies, which can slow down progression through a level. You could also make the size of the dungeon longer, or add more enemies, puzzles and barriers to slow the player down. I want the player to be able to complete the dungeon within a reasonable time during the demo, but I also don't want the player to be able to rush through in 10 minutes. So there's a lot of thought that has to go into how to balance the game, and I think figuring out numbers is quite an important part for this. The other thing I have to keep in mind is resources, namely time and energy. In a game like Stardew Valley, your progression through the mines is limited by your health, energy, and the fact that you have until 2 AM, which means that although each level isn't that large, you aren't able to progress too far each day, especially early on in the game. For Dreadwinter, there isn't an energy system or a bedtime, which means that the player could go non-stop through the dungeon, so that's something to keep in mind as well. The reason for a lack of a time limit is because I want the game to be split into a day and night mode. I want the game to be both spooky and cozy, but I think a good way to let players experience that is by splitting them into 2 separate experiences. The cafe, for example, has a day and a night shift. Initially, I wanted a single shift that the player could adjust, but I think this works a bit better. During the day, you'll be visited by ordinary human beings, but the night shift is when you start to get the supernatural mixed in, such as vampires, ghosts, and zombies. On top of that, you also have regular customers that visit each week. These are unique characters that may have an important part to play in the story. As you get to know them, you'll figure out what drinks they like, and they may also have special requests for you. By building up your relationship with your regulars, you may also get access to certain quests. I think this would be a good time to talk about the gameplay and story progression. I've talked about this before, but the story is split into 3 different routes, each centered around a different playstyle, this being adventuring, business, and coffee. Of course, you're free to play however you like, but the story helps guide you along. The adventuring route is pretty standard for an adventure RPG. You explore dungeons and take on quests to increase your adventuring rank. Along the way, you'll encounter story events unique to the adventuring route, and eventually, the whole story will come together. You're also able to run the cafe on the side, or do adventuring as the side hustle. You may also find some things that can be used in the cafe. I've got some interesting plot points in mind, so hopefully this will be a unique experience. The business route is also what you would expect from a sim-type game. You earn as much money as possible, hit milestones, buy this, expand that, and try to build a business empire. There isn't a restriction as to how you earn your money though, and running a coffee shop isn't the only way to make it. This route is more suited to the hardcore gamers and min-maxers, since you'll need to be making some insane cash by the end of it. The coffee route is the friendliest of the 3, but first, I think it would be best to explain how progression in the cafe works. Building up Dreadwinter's business relies upon increasing 2 stats, interest and loyalty. Interest affects how many customers will visit, and is increased by serving drinks, and what you serve or the quality of it is not important. It's only a small increase per drink though, so you'll need to serve a lot to build up interest. This ends up being a self-fulfilling cycle, as the more customers you get, the more interest you'll get, which gets more customers. Eventually, you'll reach a point where you can't serve all of your customers by doing things by hand, and so you'll need to make use of machines and automation to do things. This goes from using automatic coffee machines to magical golems that serve customers for you. They might even have coffee machines built into them. In exchange for efficiency, machines aren't able to make quality coffee, so you'll be relying on sales volume alone to make money, which I feel leads to the path of becoming a soulless corporation. Loyalty, on the other hand, is built up by the quality of your service. It affects how long a customer is willing to stay and how much they're willing to tip. The amount of loyalty gained depends on the drink, and most importantly, the quality of it, though you get a little bit from conversing with your customers. A standard coffee will gain almost nothing, but a 1-star brew can gain a substantial amount, and a perfect coffee will have a huge boost. The idea behind this is to reward a player for focusing on their craft, which hopefully is a good incentive to play a more relaxed style, since this is only doable by brewing drinks manually. This leads into how the coffee route has progressed, which is focused around your regular customers and improving your brewing skills. By building up a community around your coffee shop, you may be able to solve problems through your connections, rather than through money or violence. My goal with this is to create a relaxing game that I'd want to play, since I tend to lean more into the min-maxing playstyle. This is something that I've wanted to have from the very start, but I've only recently been able to implement this within the game. So overall, I'd say the game is in a pretty good spot to be ready by the deadline, which is the Steam Next Fest in February. Over the past year, a lot has changed, and I feel like I have a clear vision of what I want the game to be and what needs to be done. With this in mind, let's go over what I plan to do next and what will be in the demo. By the time you see this video, hopefully the dungeon will be tidied up and ready to go, as my plan for December is to finish up what I need to do for the cafe gameplay, and then focus on the content side. I'd say the main thing I'm planning to add is a customization system, so you can buy furniture and decorations to make Dreadwinter unique to you. Originally, I wanted the design to be something like Café LeBlanc in Persona 5, but I think it should be up to the player as to what aesthetic they go for, whether that's modern, fantasy, optimized for maximum customers, or a complete mess. I then need to add the quest system, rebuild the outdated save system, and figure out how character schedules will work. After that, I can focus on actual content, such as designing the remaining characters, making more items and equipment to customize the player and customers, and finishing the remaining interiors for the buildings in town. Not all of it will be available in the demo, mostly due to time constraints, but I also think there should be some mystery before the full release. I also need to start doing sound design and composing some music, which is quite new to me, but I'm excited to start. The demo itself will last for a week in game, which I think gives a reasonable amount of time to try out the game, and gives me something to balance the game around. That's it for this video. The best way to support me is by wishlisting Dreadwinter on Steam, as well as the usual like and subscribe. Please look forward to the demo, and as always, thanks for watching.